Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with our weekly Q&A video. This is Season 8, Episode 39. If you're on YouTube right now, you can check out the links in the description to get at this on a lot of major podcasting platforms. I'm hesitant to say all, but I'm thinking probably most of them. All the big ones anyways. Our first question of the week comes from Sinemac, and they say, I know you've said why before, but could you reiterate on why you put the Flashpoint team to Promotion 5? Since Flashpoint Batman is in the challenge now, I figured this would be a good time for this question. And could you recommend a team and gear to beat the final bonus battle?
Do you want to do the hard part first? The easy question first? I guess the easy one is the first part. Why 5? It's not necessarily a magic number. It's that a lot of times what we do is our goal for having a team is to be good in multiplayer. We don't care about the offline single player story mode anymore because we finished it once. There's not a lot of replay value except for maybe bonus battle 6 and some of the higher bonus battles in order to level up your characters. But you can still use it for that, but multiplayer does just as good a job once you're not talking about credits and you're not talking about bonus battle 6. So you could go higher than 5, and so there's a good argument to be made, right? I mean, when we first started playing this, we were collectors as much as like the in-game strategy. So, aiming for Elite 10, level 60. But it comes at a price. Now, max battle points is 5,000 per fight. You can get that with this team at Elite 5, level 50. The higher you get, the more likely you are to face Astro Harness. That's really it. I mean, when you're talking multiplayer and you want to be successful in multiplayer, you want to be able to finish it fast. You want to be able to max out your points. And what slows you down is if you lose a fight, you lose your bonus points. And Astro Harness slows you down just because it's Astro Harness. And even if you're going to win the fight eventually, no matter what. And I think that's what it comes down to, that when you the higher the matchmaking goes, and we've used the idea of something that was defined in Injustice 2, which was the threat level, I think. And even though they've never said it here, I think they use some sort of judgment of a team. And the higher the threat level, the more likely you are to face legendary 4.5-star gears. And Astro Harness is one of them. You face Astro Harness. Fights are just slower. That's really it.
So what we really want to do is just skim the absolute sort of bottom of the barrel of the max battle point fights. And that makes it the easiest because you're more often than you would otherwise, you're facing people who don't have all their sort of gear figured out. They don't have every gear maxed out. And so you can get in easier fights a lot more consistently. And the reason, so there's sort of advantage and disadvantage, right? As your stats get higher, the possible advantage of having way higher stats is that they can only match you against people with your stats are lower, right? Whereas when you are at this sort of earlier level, the later fights, you're matching against people with higher stats than you. So what this strategy is sort of based on the assumption that your team is good enough, either in terms of synergy or gear or just your skill, to beat teams that have higher stats than you do.
Even if it's the same characters, right?
So, Elite 5, like you said, it's not the magic number. You can do anything to get yourself up there. You could also use augments. You could use health and damage augments if you wanted to, or even something like just damage augments if you wanted to get your team's stats high enough. But you didn't have extra copies, or you didn't want to elite them for one reason or another. Or if you wanted to change the balance of health to offense, you could definitely do the same thing with augments, and you have a little bit more granular control with augments too. I don't actually know what stats exactly get you 5,000, right? We don't have the math on that,
because it's not straight up damage, not straight up health. It's some sort of combination that also takes into account maybe the passive, maybe not gear, but definitely other things about the team, because it's not just straight stats. You can't just add them up.
Yeah. So this is one case in which, the reason why we recommend Elite 5 is because that's an exact known quantity for us. We know that this team, at this level and this elite level, without any health or damage augments, is good enough, right?
Right.
And for everything else, you'd sort of have to do trial and error. I guess if you really wanted to just be barely scraping the edge of maximum battle points, you could play fights one at a time on the first fight of the ladder,
right,
and then do single augments at a time too, and then find out the exact point where the stat swapped over to being 5,000. But that's our sort of general philosophy. And for new-ish gold characters, this level tends to be enough to either get max battle points all the way through, or maybe sometimes you get 4,500 and then 5,000, right?
Right. Oh, you know what's funny actually, that I don't know why it hasn't occurred to us for a while, because it hasn't been an issue for a while. When you ride at the top, when you've got later game characters that are Elite 10, level 60, what happens is you end up facing a lot of the same teams. Once you get to when matchmaking has to give you a much stronger team, there's less of a choice in the kind of characters that are available that will give you the right kind of matchup that gets the high kind of stats that they're aiming for in the last few fights of matchmaking.
It's pretty much only the highest stat teams with augments.
Right, and so then you lose out on variety. Part of the fun is actually trying to manage the other teams. I'll tell you what, aside from maybe the medals, often the teams with the best synergy lately is in the first or second fight in the ladder.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going to point out again, we're going to do another 7 ultimates. That's 7 ladders of 7 fights each. So that's 49 fights. Mm-hmm. And you're going to see just how good this team is. This is average. This is not even people can always pick out an ideal speed run.
Yeah.
This is just general play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there we go. And the second part of the question is recommending a team and gear to beat the final bonus battle.
This is almost an impossible question. I guess there's general approaches, right? To me, Flashpoint team is what do you call it? A general all-round good team.
Yeah.
Every character has a huge amount of offensive potential when you gear it like this. If you're not worried like you are in Survivor about making sure everybody survives, it's easy to win a war of attrition. And especially when you're talking the single-player game, the story mode, the bonus battle, all they can really do against you is monster stats and some sort of fight effect.
Yeah.
And without gear, I don't think there's anything that they can really match you up against you. I guess if you don't have teams that are strong enough. Oh, so here's the thing too. I want to point out, and it's worth revisiting every once in a while because it's easy to forget, is that in story mode, you generate more power by getting hit. Mm-hmm. Right? Getting hit by a special always gives you a lot of power. Getting hit in multiplayer doesn't generate a lot of power, but getting hit in story mode generates a significant amount of power. Offline play.
Yeah. So it's sort of equalized, right? So it is a lot more just about, are your stats good enough to win?
Right, because if you're hitting them more, but your damage is not enough, they're going to get power. And when they get power, their specials are going to do a huge amount of damage. So it makes it harder to fight effectively against higher stat teams unless you have something else. And that unless is team synergy, gear, a great passive, or both. Or not, or both, or all three.
Yeah. So you know who your best team is. Just practically. Right?
Yeah.
Whatever your people are who have the highest stats is who you want to bring in. And you just want to bring in your best gear. And you want to... it's harder to have a specialist and a basic damage dealer the same way. Because, your specialist needs to also be able to take hits, right? So they need to be a little bit of a tank. Or, but if you have Tantu Totem, basically, it's the same strategy if you have a really good team with really good synergy, because there's not a lot you can do to stop them.
Right.
Especially with ones that don't rely on building up power the same way. Mm-hmm. Ones that can just sort of have power and expend it, or basic damage dealers tend to be safer bets.
Yeah.
But there's not really anything special. Most of the time, It's just try it with who you think your best team is, and if they're not good enough, then you probably need to come back with better stats.
Yeah, that'll do it. And I guess the one strategy that works, say, in Survivor that works well here is too, if part of the reason why you're having trouble is that other team is really just way higher stats than you, and your gear may not be good enough to balance that out, then what you... Unless it's like a Blackest Night Flash team. Like, honestly, right now I can't remember who the last bonus battle is. Unless it's a Blackest Night Flash team, then what you can do is use damage over time. Because damage over time scales up to the health of your opponent. So if you have something that does 10% damage over time, you need to hit them 10 times.
Yeah.
And then plus one more to knock out that last little bit. Because damage over time, you can't knock them out on straight damage over time. It has to be something else.
Yeah, so that's something like Razagul Scimitar.
Yeah, and we've shown that too, right? That we're the best way to do that, because that's why it was so neat when we first were able to beat the boss, Arkham Origins Batman. Because here's the thing: back in the day, his fight was no passives. So not only did he have high stats, you lost your passive, and I believe that was true. Did they unlock that after Gear was released or before Gear was released?
I don't remember.
It might have been right after, and definitely there wasn't the same number of damage over time gears, if there were any, because what you had was what was the first one? Ibistic? And that was one of the multiplayer exclusives, right?
Yeah.
So the number of damage over time gears, I don't think there were any. So what was cool was we would take, and I'll include this in the description, but we took Bronze Catwoman and using a meat shield, so she was doing all the damage. Mm-hmm. I think we might have used Solomon Grundy as a meat shield, because, Solomon Grundy is...
kind of sucks.
Yeah, otherwise does. And we used... Catwoman, the Bronze Catwoman, and there wasn't any special thing for getting a huge amount of power like you get with Tanta Totem, right? Just tagging in. Yeah. So we just let the meat shield waste some time. We would build up some power and just make him bleed. And when you stacked her bleed, you wouldn't even need 10 bleeds, because you could boost her damage over time by 10%, each time. So you win 3 bars instead of just doing the 30%, you could do a bunch extra just because they were all stacked together.
Yeah. There we go. Our next question comes from Angel of Light. They say, I want to ask you a question, which is good because we're here to answer your question. Is Batman Returns Catwoman good? I just got her.
Context is everything, right?
Yeah.
Is she good? Compared to stuff you can get from Challenge? Compared to the other characters? I mean, she's not awful. So let's look at her. So her passive is Deadly Games. Damage over time attacks deal plus 100% damage for Catwoman and her teammates. Her base damage is 950. Her base health is 850. So let's talk about whether she's any good or not. I mean, one of the things that's interesting, I'm not sure that it can surprise me, because I remember it, but I always think, you know what, if you're not aware of how the game mechanics work in terms of how they create characters, it might come as a surprise to you that anytime a special has an additional effect, like power drain or damage over time, if it has some sort of offensive extra effect, then the damage is most often reduced.
Yeah.
So,
which is why we sometimes note exceptions to that, where the damage doesn't appear to be reduced.
Right.
Which is good.
So her special one does damage over time. Mm-hmm. It does bleed. Bleed is the best damage over time because it will boost damage taken by 10%.
Yeah.
So when you do 3 in a row, you're boosting damage to 30% all at once, and each tick of damage over time is bleeding a little bit extra.
Yeah.
So, but her special 1 damage that you see on the card, it's only 12,273. When you maxed out like we have to Elite 7 level 50. So for a comparable character, say Red Sun Deathstroke, who has the same damage when he's maxed out, his special one will do twice as much, 24,547.
Yeah.
Why she loses it is because I guess her damage over time is another 12,000 and a bit, and because of her passive, it's doubled to 24.
Yeah.
So it's more, but it gets rinsed by tagging out.
Yeah. So she has the ability to deal up to 1.5 times her special damage for her stats.
If you max
with
out to
damage over
200%,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know that's true because both of their special 2s, both Red Sun Deathstrokes and Batman Return Catwoman, have a special 2 that does 73,640 damage.
Yeah.
And why that matters is, so, it's not bad. When this is what you've got and you have access to players in the store, she's not a bad damage over time character. And in the old days when you'd have potentially set up a damage over time team, it was a lot of fun. And I think at one point when she was on an Arkham team, she would even boost the damage over time more on an Arkham character that boosted it based on teammates. They fixed it. It was a glitch at one point, but you get the same amount of benefit, I think, if, say, with Arkham Knight Catwoman, to boost her damage over time by having Batman Returns Catwoman, as you would another Arkham
so many times.
Yeah, I know. But because of that, she doesn't really offer a lot more, because on her own she doesn't. If you're gonna have an Arkham Knight Catwoman team, you want Arkham Knight Batgirl. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't really add anything, especially since as the game's progressed, a damage over time team is really difficult to play long term. You can have a little bit of fun with it, but to grind it like we do with the Flashpoint team, like this Flashpoint team basically has no weakness that any other team doesn't have. The main weakness against, I think, is against the Red Sun Green Lantern team. Mm-hmm. But against the damage over time team, so a Blackest Night Flash team, because of Blackest Night Flash's passive, when you do damage over time, instead of taking away health, they heal and get boosted power gen. Mm-hmm. So that's really dangerous. I mean, it's not like you face them every time, but if you do face them,
you're a little screwed.
Yeah, for that ladder, and you lose your bonus. Injustice 2 Aquaman reflects it back doubled when he does his own special. And you can work around that a little bit, because if he doesn't have power, like when you want to DM retirements when he doesn't have power, you want to keep him from getting power, or just do so much damage that he never gets a chance to. Mm-hmm. And that's okay, because he's only one member of the team. Like a Blackest Night Flashing, everybody is healing and generating power on damage over time effects. Yeah. And I guess the other, it's not even so much weakness, is that sometimes if your main offensive tool is going to be damage over time, Arkham Knight Batman, there's what's the chance? Like is it one in 3 chance that he's going to be immune to damage over time?
Is it?
I don't know, because there's six things to choose from.
He gets to pick any 2, right?
He gets to pick any 2.
Yeah. So it's a 1 in 6 chance
for each one.
It's a 5 and 6, and then a 4 and 5, right? Because they're not independent.
So it's like 5 and 6, and then a 4 and 5. 5 and 6, 4 and 5. So that's 20 over 24, and 1 minus that.
Yeah. Wait.
You'll do the math.
Yeah.
Or no, it's a 20 over it's 20 over 30. 1 minus that. So it is like a
2/3. It's a 1/3 chance.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes the math just works out.
Yeah, intuitively it does.
Yeah.
So what was I gonna say?
That sometimes.
So there's 2 of those situations are where you're a little bit hamstrung.
Yeah.
But one case you're actually really
like
at a disadvantage because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Arkham Knight Batman is only sometimes, but he shows up enough that if you keep playing, you'll eventually run into that situation.
Yeah. So it's not bad if you're going to play around with her, if you're going to have her. If you've got TNT Totem, there are better options for using a specialist.
Yeah.
Damage over time teams don't work nearly as well as they used to. And if you don't have TNT Totem, I wouldn't recommend a damage over time team.
Yeah. It's too bad. I wish they made interesting teams, because I think that a damage over time team is a pretty interesting team. And I wish interesting teams were a little more viable.
If there was something that you could, the same way, like, all right, so we know that TNT Totem was super powerful, but what it did was it took a whole subgroup of characters that had passives that benefited from power, and it revitalized them. Like, it made them all viable options for play when they really weren't before. Like, the passives didn't add much, and all of a sudden, TNT Totem made them really good.
Yeah.
And that's what we need. I'm not sure exactly what it would look like, but I think if we had something like that for damage over time teams, it would be a reasonable counter. Like, it doesn't even have to be a damage over time character. If there's some way that you had a character that could negate the passives, for example, for like 10 seconds, that would be really cool, and that would do it.
Yeah. That would be great. Unfortunately, I doubt we're getting that.
So I think the short answer is that she's not that great. If in the early game, if you don't have TNT Totem, I'd go with a basic damage, like a basic attack team. And if you do have TNT Totem, damage over time with her is not the way to go. If you're using damage over time on another character, then all of a sudden you're taking 2 slots on your team with damage over time characters. And you're leaving only 1 slot to deal with the situation where you need something more than just damage over time. Actually, and I do want to point out too, if you're going to go damage over time, I think Arkham Knight Catwoman is the best, because she either gets no reduction in her special 2 damage, or very little reduction, and she does damage over time on her special 2. In which case, you don't want Batman Returns Catwoman, you just want another Arkham teammate. Maybe even Arkham Knight. So anyway, sorry. Yeah.
So we have this question here again. That's from last week. Did you have more thoughts?
Was this last week's question?
Yeah, we did. Remember, we talked about it.
Oh, maybe it was. So Chihuahuas says, "Can you cover situation for hackers, because there's been a huge surge of them lately?" I think it was maybe framed a different way, because this is definitely a new question.
Oh, never mind.
And what do you do with it? But it's the same idea, definitely the same vein, right? That somebody's noticing that there's more hackers, and last time the question was, why are there so much hackers? And this is more, so what do you do about it?
That's true. Okay.
My feeling is, all right, so the hardest part is, you can think they're hackers. They're not always. And without having the experience to judge, I think a lot of times it's very easy to think that people are hacking when they're actually not.
Yeah, if they have something that's literally impossible, they're definitely hacking, right? If they have the boss Ares.
Yeah.
Or if they have, like... Well, see, when you say hackers, part of the problem is that what makes somebody a hacker versus something else, right?
Yeah.
Because you can accidentally, legitimately have the same gear on multiple characters, right?
Right.
So they might be a hacker, they might be somebody who's doing an exploit, who's figured out how to do it, or they might be somebody who's done it accidentally and
got really unlucky.
Yeah, and just had that be who's put forward. So you don't always know.
Yeah. And I guess the issue then becomes, well, if you're not sure... Oh, well, actually, you know what? Something's funny, too? And sometimes this can be a little bit more subtle. Like, at one point, there had not been enough Phantom Zone seasons, or Phantom Zone events, to have enough Valorium to max out 3 metal characters.
Yeah, so the only way that you could have it is if you were using glitches or hacks.
Now, and it wasn't obvious, but definitely it's passed over, and we're getting close to time where we can have all 6, but you're not facing all 6 in multiplayer. Like, you can't face 6 players at a time, so you wouldn't know if they've got a whole bunch of other characters. The 3 other metal characters that are maxed out. So there are going to be more subtle things too. So if they are hackers, or I guess even if they're the issue now is when you report them using the Warner Brothers online forum, they used to be more aggressive about suspending accounts. I don't think they are so much anymore. And even then, you want to be a little bit careful, because they used to be trigger happy, and so people who weren't hacking, who were reported as hacking, would sometimes get their account suspended.
Yeah.
Which was kind of crappy.
So the best thing you can do is make sure that you're not rewarding them. So if you see that you're gonna maybe lose a fight and you're pretty confident that somebody's a hacker, you can just quit out of it so they don't get the battle points for beating you.
Yeah.
And there's not much else that you can really do.
I like that too better because it's a proportional response. So if you're wrong about judging somebody to be a hacker, the worst that you've done is you've taken away battle points.
Yeah, you've made them play for their position on the leaderboard, which is fair.
And I don't even mind that. But if you were going to report everybody with the potential harm of suspending their account and you were mixing up a bunch of non-hackers with hackers, then it seems like that's too much potential harm to that's justified by the uncertainty around whether your judgment is right about what's going on.
Yeah. And, if there's people on the leaderboard who are clearly hacked, there's not much you can do, right? Like, theoretically, you can report people on the leaderboard, but that's the kind of thing that's so publicly visible that if Warner Brothers wants to do something about it, they just can't, right? They don't really need reports the same way, so there's not a huge amount that you can do.
Right.
Yeah, there we go. Our next comment comes from Joel Christian, and they say, "You guys are amazing. Quick question. What do you suggest I do to score higher in multiplayer? I play with Deadshot, Raven, and Suicide Squad Joker."
That's not an awful team. I mean, there's elements of this question, and I feel like we've answered a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I mean, it's not an awful thing to repeat, because it'll come if we get a chance to get to the last question. It might be worth getting into a bit. But so the key really is maximize the battle points for the time you play, and it sounds sort of like stupid obvious.
Yeah.
But it's not obvious necessarily how you're approaching it, because all right. So here's the thing: Deadshot, Raven, and Suicide Squad Joker. There's not a lot of synergy there.
Yeah.
So when I say synergy, I mean there's not a lot of advantage that you get so that any of them are so much better for being with each other. Raven, and I'm assuming it's Raven Prime, if you don't specify, that's what I'm going to assume it is. So she's really powerful. She's not that fast.
Yeah.
So the best way of taking advantage of her passive is that you swap health early. Because if you swap health late, there's a good chance that you're not actually reducing the enemy's health by much. If your health is low and so is theirs, then instead of getting 100% health when you swap and reducing them to 10, you get 20% health to their 10.
Yeah.
So, and if you do that, you're just sitting there waiting to take hits. I mean, it's not a bad strategy when you have trouble and you're outmatched a bit and your gear's not that good. I think the key really is that your gear has to be good. More important than the characters that you've got. Once you've got decided on a team, then what you want to do is tweak them enough so that you can it doesn't get significantly harder to finish a ladder and get your bonus.
Yeah.
But it gets faster to finish. And at some point it might get a little bit harder, and that's where you back off. And then if I suspect that if you're having this trouble, then your gear's not maxed out, then you start playing around with the gear that you've got to try to boost the benefits that you get from it. And I'm being abstract for a reason, because I think if you've got the control, the Flashpoint team is absolutely, in my mind, without a doubt, the way this is geared, the fastest team for ranking higher multiplayer.
Yeah. So to abstract this to the most basic level, right? Because that advice is essentially get better gear, find a better synergy for your team, right? Which is also sort of hard.
Yeah.
But to abstract it to the level where you can maybe just think about it from first principles for what makes sense to you, is that there's two ways to get more battle points, right?
Yeah.
And the two ways to get more battle points is to either play more or make more of the time that you spend playing. And the ways to make more of the time you spend playing breaks down into getting more battle points per fight and finishing fights faster. Oh. Right? So those are sort of the really sort of three basic tent poles of it. And we're assuming that, you don't want to hear just play more, because that's really obvious advice, right? Anybody can say, well, if you spent, twice the amount of time, you'd get twice as many battle points and you'd score higher.
Yeah.
And so you need to think about the ways to get more battle points and finish fights faster, and you're trying to balance those two. When you were talking about your advice for, getting better stats until you hit that point, right?
Yeah.
You're sort of trying to maximize your battle points per minute, essentially, right? And
battle point rate, BPR.
Yeah. And so you just need to look at, if you're playing right now and you're not getting max battle points, you need to find a team or work your way towards a team that'll get there. And if you have a team with max battle points, you need to look at how you can get to finishing fights fast.
Yeah. I don't see it in Deadshot, Raven, and Suicide Squad Joker.
Yeah, you're kind of working at a bit of a deficit there in terms of, because you're always going to be low optimization for speed.
Yeah, and I guess, when you've got more information, see what else is there, that might be it. If this is their highest gold team, then other teams that might be faster aren't getting very many battle points per fight.
Mm-hmm.
And until you know what your rosters and you play, and I guess the fact that we're eliding is that most people aren't going to spend a lot of money on recharges.
Yeah.
So then when you've got this team, if this fits the amount that you're playing, and you're not running out of power and stopping because you've run out of juice, then that's fine. But if you are running out of juice and you're playing less because of it, and then you reduce weaker teams, then gear becomes that much more important, because then you can use other sort of bought in the store golds, which is not the case here, to set up other teams that can win and generate more battle points while you're playing.
It's true. The other thing is that if this is your best team by far, and you are playing and then stopping playing and maybe doing something else on somewhere else with a different team, your best call might actually be, watching the videos to get your recharge if you don't have cards or stuff like that, right? So that's all just sort of appealing to that, doing it faster, maximizing your battle points per minute through the two main sources. Because that's true, actually. Time spent doing stuff that's not playing is part of your battle point per minute too. And so, it's kind of obvious in the same way that playing more is obvious. But if this is your team, one way to get more bang for your buck is to have recharge cards, right?
Yeah.
Which I think most people probably aren't willing to buy recharge cards just to be slightly more efficient in multiplayer, but
Yeah, and that's why these questions are sort of interesting and almost impossible to answer in any kind of specific way. Part of it is just learning some of the principles and starting to apply it, because if you just remember very specific things, it's not going to help you the same way.
Yeah, for how to get better, the advice used to be so much easier, which it just used to be, buy golds until you had enough golds to match how long you were playing, and then start saving for those dedicated team packs. And if you really, really wanted to make sure that you got it good, you would save up until you could buy, as many copies of the team pack as you wanted, or almost as many, or only start buying when it rotated, so that you knew that you'd have a while to sort of get that same team.
Right.
But now the advice is so different, because it's so much harder to make a good synergy team without just collecting stuff over a long period of time. Because for us, it was easy. It was almost impossible not to take them up on the offer.
Right.
Because those team packs were usually not that much more expensive than
the power credits first. I mean, it's not cash.
Yeah, it was power credits, but they weren't overpriced, right? The highest price one for a set of 3 was 600,000, and you're getting a great team, right?
Yeah, I remember. I mean, the Femme Fatale pack used to be power credits. That was a great team.
Yeah.
There's the Red Sun team where there were only 3 Red Sun characters. That was a great team. Lots of options that have sadly disappeared.
Even just any set of 3 at that point, just getting the benefit of being able to buy one pack with a full team in it of gold cards, instead of having to sort of get random luck from the gold pack or to pay way more for them directly in the store. It was just always a better deal to buy it in the team pack than anywhere else, and for sort of early to mid game, it was the best way to make a team, even if they didn't have a lot of synergy, because you could buy one thing and keep them all at the same elite level and know that you were only spending money to get one specific set of guys maxed out, which was always a better way to spend your money than just random chance. Yeah, so there we go. And our last comment this week comes from Noah Frank L, and they say, could you guys utilize the chapter feature in these longer videos? It's my favorite YouTube feature, and it's super helpful when coming back to these videos for information. And so, the thing that we'll say is that we, at various times throughout our channel history, there have been people who have done this work for us and went back through stuff.
Or while they're watching.
Yeah.
Kept track of the minutes.
And done timestamps and posted them in the comments. So, if anybody is listening right now, it means that you're watching the whole thing. We have historically super appreciated people, and we'll pin your comment, and now that there is the chapter feature to sort of more formally break it up in the video, we would put the timestamps in the description, which would make the chapters for you guys if somebody was putting that work in. Right?
Yeah, so we're happy to pin your comment too if you do that.
Yeah, pin your comment, maybe put it in the description so the chapter feature would work, and then if we did, we would credit you in the description of the videos.
The biggest problem, the reason why we don't do it, is that it would actually involve watching this whole thing again. Mm-hmm. And for the time that we've got, if we were putting in the time to do that, we would not be making as many videos as we do. Yeah. Like, there's no way we'd be able to do this weekly in addition to the recaps.
Mm-hmm. Even just scrubbing through it, I guess theoretically we could just every single time we remembered to do it, make a note of what time we start reading the new question. But we flow pretty free here, and it's
loosey goosey.
Yeah. And so we definitely take stuff into consideration, and I understand that would be a positive feature for some people, but given sort of the way that we do this and the fact that we just really just churn it out, right?
Yeah.
It would be hard to do it.
So I mean, the stuff we do right now, we do it for fun, and if there was going to be some other motivation to do it like that, it would have to be justified. Like I've gotten to the age now where time has so much value to me, and I can't spend it doing stuff like this unless we're making $1 a video on one of these. So
it's true. We kind of just have to do the stuff that's fun for us, and it's at the point, right? I mean, we talk about being more willing to do stuff when we're getting like Patreon support, which is why we upload it for the podcast and stuff. But we also, what's important to note is that we sort of, even with the Patreon support, right, we need to do this in a way that's fun for us, because if we're doing it as a job, it's, even with Patreon, it's not minimum wage. So that's where we're at. But we do appreciate people asking for stuff. We're never gonna judge you for asking for stuff, because it is a thing that you use and would like, and we get that. So we appreciate the comment. We never dislike feedback, even if it's like, you're not doing this thing that I would want you to do, and it doesn't seem like it's that hard. We'll take it in any form, as long as you're not being super mean,
or rude.
Well, if
we don't like rude.
Well, sometimes it's kind of funny, so we don't.
Rude can be funny.
We don't respond well to rude, but I don't even really hate rude.
That's true. That's true.
But we won't always be taking it. Well, not taking it into account. We won't always be doing it. We won't always follow feedback, even if it's not necessarily bad feedback.
Right.
So, not a bad question, not a bad thing to ask. Unfortunately, we're probably not going to be doing that for you.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the end of the episode. So, I'd like to give a shout out to Eliza, the Soviet farm worker Kaiten. Her mom picked cucumbers on a farm in Russia in exchange for free socialized university tuition.
That seems like a fair exchange.
Seems like a pretty fair exchange, yeah. I mean, well, things weren't great in the USSR.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons, but that was one of the things, every government has pros and cons.
Really?
Things in America.
Most governments have pros and cons.
Most governments have pros and cons. I guess there are some that are pretty across the board bad. Like, for all the problems America has, some people get wealthy. There's good things for some people. They do some stuff for some folks sometimes.
I guess.
And this shout out was brought to you by Lisa directly, who wrote this one and gave it to me to just put up. So I appreciate the week off of thinking up stuff to say.
More content to create.
Yeah, exactly. And we'd also like to give a huge thank you to all the wonderful folks who support us in Patreon.
And that would be Victor Gomez, Consul Peasant, and Edwoon at the top tier, last word. Sinemac, Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier. Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., Irvin Ruiz, and Eddydoo, who supports on credited level. Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, Awesome Gamer 2for1, Pabu RS, Gavin Malott, and Isfar E at the gratitude level.
Thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you next time.
Komoda.